Hi guys, I wanted to just follow up on the Cialis case a little bit and just give you some of my comments on some things that we've talked about and went over. And really, the first one is a question I asked you, and it's really is it better to be first than to be better? And one of the things that you can think about is Viagra's overwhelming success is really attributed to them getting to the market and getting into the mind first, and really owning that piece of the mind. If they had such enormous PR generated by the cure for ED, and it really was effective in building the brand over time. It was on national news. The campaign generated thousands of media mentions, etc. And really, what that led to is the brand building of Viagra, where Viagra today is one of the most recognized pharmaceutical brands with over 70% of worldwide market in the category. And so, that first to be, is it better to be first than better in this case? First really won out. The second thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is number two brand, and I think we talked about this on the boards in the forum a little bit. So is the number two brand that uses a better claim a big success sometimes, and that's really a hard question. And so really the second brand in the market in this case was Levitra, but Levitra had really crappy positioning and didn't really do a good job. It tried to claim that it was better than Viagra. So typically powerful number two brands, need to be positioned as the opposite of the leader. And we've talked about that in the different positioning strategies that we've gone over. So not the me too, but better. And so you can look at some examples, and Lowe's really took the feminine approach versus the Home Depot masculine approach in that category. We've talked about Target and Walmart. One of the other examples is I always use toothpaste, for example, or mouth care, but Scope, good tasting versus Listerine, bad tasting. So what happened with Levitra is just saying that it was better was really tough, and it was a tough claim to sell in an advertisement. There's not a lot of credibility in just making the pure better claim, and if there's so much better, the person that's buying it is going to think about, if there's so much better, why is Viagra still the leader? And really, the other concept I want to talk to you about is if you can't be first, then set up a new category that you can be first in. And we've seen lots of examples of companies that have done this and done a good job doing this. So Cialis has done well, even though it was really the third brand to the market. So in France, for example, Cialis is widely known and marketed as the weekend pill because of the 36-hour duration. And it's interesting to see, well, would that play in the United States? It's really a powerful message, and it's interesting to see how companies use different positioning and different strategies depending on which market or geography that they're going after. Cialis really did a good job because of that positioning in the romantic side in terms of quickly gaining market share and really created this end of a strong competition to Viagra. One other just note on this is something that for you guys to recognize is that public relations or PR builds brands and advertising maintains brands, right? So if you look at Viagra launched with that extensive PR, and once the brand was established, it really went into the heavy, massive advertising campaign. So that's the way that powerful brands are built. They do PR first to establish the credibility of the brand, and then advertising second to accelerate and maintain the success. So look at the spend that Viagra does, right? Viagra spends almost $100 million a year defending its brand. And so once they've built that credibility, they maintain it with advertising. And you can see that with many brands that you guys are familiar with. One last note on the Cialis case, or I have two more actually. So one last note is really pay attention to this, is the target is not necessarily the same as the market. And look at maybe you could call it a mistake, maybe it did help them, but Viagra making the error or not by selecting Bob Dole as its spokesman. Dole was in the 70s, it was clearly the market, but he was not the target. Really, the target they selected was that 50-year-old married man who's having trouble or doesn't want to ask his doctor. So positioning the product for older men tells the younger men that Viagra really wasn't for them. So I get it that it did drive some credibility because who Bob Dole was and that whole authenticity of, or not some trust with Bob Dole. But you could make an argument that Viagra could have chosen a younger, more macho looking initially to make younger men feel more comfortable about talking about the problem and the product. The leader in a category should always be ways looking to promote the category, and it wasn't necessarily was the right fit. So remember just to pay attention to that who your target is and who the market is, and they're maybe not the same thing. And I think we talked about this in the write-up. I wanted to have one more thing. So names matter, right? So in addition to being the advantage of being first, Viagra had a far better name than Cialis or Levitra, and like there's connotations and associations and brand associations that come out of the name Viagra, vigorous, vitality, etc. So it's really, you can consider there's a strong connection considering the use of the drug. It was a good connection with the name. Cialis probably is the weakest name, right? And I know that you guys have talked about this on some of the chat, but it benefits from a stronger positioning strategy they had than Levitra. So Cialis, you could make an argument that if they had a stronger name, it would add and it would be another touch point and connection that would create better associations for positioning of the brand. But since the Cialis is in the market and they've had success with positioning, it's probably too late to do that. But names do matter, and you guys should pay attention to that when you're evaluating positioning strategies. So one of the things to highlight, from a positioning thing that we've talked about is, we see the Cialis case as a good way to highlight that positioning has become important even in a category like pharmaceuticals. And the FDA said that 78% of drugs that entered the market in the last 6 years were not likely to be improvement over drugs already sold to treat the same condition. And then there's also been a huge increase in the prevalence of lifestyle and quality of life drugs. So remember, positioning, as we've talked about, is not what you do to the product, but what you do to the mind of the consumer. So one more thing, just like the last thing in this one, I promise, is really looking at competitive dynamics if you're the first mover or the second mover, really. So if you're the first mover, you have some advantages, right? You're going to lock the customers in, you become associated with the category you're playing in, and you get network effects among influencers and consumers. And you also probably have much better economies of scale. From a second mover standpoint, the second mover could have some advantages too, because you typically would get a free ride on the first mover's cost, including educating the market, right? So they're going to educate the market for you for free, and you're going to get a free ride on that. And the other benefit sometimes for a second mover or even third mover is that you're going to learn from the leader's mistakes, and you're going to adapt and change and get better from those mistakes. And you're also going to have a better understanding of actually the true market size and what's really going on. A lot of times this happens, first mover, second mover, we talk about that. In certain industries, there's also parallel entry where companies enter the market together. And one advantage in doing that is that you have broader and an increased category awareness when there's multiple competitors. But anyway, that's some things that I wanted you guys to think about Cialis and the Cialis case. Thanks.